All righty, guys. Thank you guys so much for joining us for this week's live viewing of YSell's Network webinar, Pivot During Panic series. We are so happy to have a wonderful panel for you guys. And I am going to kick it off to our host, Joyce Johnson.
Hello, everyone. I am Joyce Johnson, your host, author, speaker, sales champion coach, and founder of YSell's Network. Thank you for joining us tonight. We have an amazing lineup for you. We tonight have decided to continue the very important conversation and take the title of The Road to Inclusion. So a lot have been in the media. We're in the midst of a movement right now. A lot of changes is happening, a lot of activity. And we're speaking a lot about diversity and inclusion, or diversity or inclusion. And so the end game is, in some case, inclusion, and then also the equity that we get out of that inclusion. So I wanted to bring on some speakers tonight and take it from an education perspective, an organizational perspective, and a corporate look to say, what can we do to get moving down that road to inclusion? And so I brought on some guest speakers with me tonight. I have Dr. Zelia Wiley from Kansas State University. I have Ebony Travis from Boston Scientific, and Kevin Clayton from Cleveland Cavaliers. And so I'm going to hand off for them to introduce themselves to you and share with you, who they are and what they do, and then we'll move on into the discussion. So I'm going to hand off to the first person on the panel, and that's that you see on your screen there to the left is Ebony Travis.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Ebony Travis, coming to you from Dallas, Texas, and I am a senior manager at Boston Scientific for diversity and inclusion. For me, I'm just excited to have the opportunity to speak to you about, the work that we do and what it means to our organization and what it means to me as a diversity and inclusion manager. I support our D&I goals, and my primary focus is on our people of color strategy, what we like to call our multicultural strategy. And that's leading the efforts for training and development and recruitment, and really giving an opportunity for so many to join such an awesome organization like ours. I've been with this company for 23 years, and I got to tell you, they're going to have to drag me out because I absolutely love what I do. So thank you.
Thank you, Ebony. And now we're going to move over to Dr. Zelia Wiley.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to thank Joyce as well for this opportunity to just be with this important panel. And I'm just so happy that we're going from different perspectives. I've been at Kansas State University for 16 years, most specifically with the College of Agriculture and K-State Research and Extension, where I'm the Chief Diversity Officer for our efforts through teaching, research, and extension. I was at the University of Kentucky for 8 years before here, and Penn State. I'm a product of the land grant systems. All of my degrees are in agriculture, Prairie View A&M University, the 1890 land grant in Texas, and the Pennsylvania State University of the 1862 of Pennsylvania. Saying all that is to say that we have to feed the world. We're in a pandemic right now, COVID-19, but we still have to feed the world. So our goal is to produce and to get individuals to work in a diverse workforce. So it's great to be on this panel because educationally, we're preparing the students to be able to work together and to live together, to go to the next phase, to take it over to the next generation. So I blaze trails for people to come behind me. Thank you.
Awesome, Dr. Wiley, thank you. And next, Kevin Clayton.
Hey, Joyce, thanks a lot. It's a pleasure to join Dr. Wiley and Ebony on this panel. So just from a background standpoint, I work for the Cleveland Cavaliers operating company. And oftentimes when I say I work for the Cavs, people think about the basketball team. It actually is the sports and entertainment component of Dan Gilbert's family of companies, which include things like Rocket Mortgage, Fieldhouse, Quicken Loans, and what have you. But we have 5 different properties, including Rocket Mortgage, Fieldhouse, which is our arena, of which we host over 200 events there. We have an esports team. We also have a hockey team, as well as we have the Canton Charge, which is the kind of minor league team into the Cavaliers. By way of background, I've been with the Cavs now 14 months, but I have a background in healthcare. I also started my career with Procter & Gamble in sales and marketing, and then evolved over a period of time by holding chief diversity officer positions with the American Cancer Society, Russell Athletic, the United States Tennis Association, and Bon Secours Mercy Health. So I'm able to approach this work from many different angles, from multiple industries, and I'm happy to share this evening.
Thank you, Kevin. So again, our topic for tonight is the road to inclusion. How do we get there? A lot of people have been asking during this movement now, what's next? What's next, how we get there. We want to find, protesting is great and we definitely need it, and we've seen the change due to it. And so now we got to roll our sleeves up and say, what do we want to come out of those protests? We've seen some movement already on some of those things, but we want to be able to offer you guys actionable items that you can also take advantage of. And I'm just going to put out there one, which yesterday's YSales Network challenge of the day was to get out and early vote. So if you're in a state where early voting is taking place, you have until tomorrow evening to go out and do that. So we're going to encourage you to go out and have your voice, because when you go out and early vote, especially in these local and state elections, those are important, because when you go to court, those are the people that you see. The judges that are on the ballot, they're the ones handing out the sentences before you ever get to a state or national level. So it's important for us to exercise our right to vote and to go out and vote early as well. And that's anyone and everyone, no matter what your political affiliation is, it's important for you to go out and vote. So with that said, I want to pose a question to our panel today. In your thought, how are you processing diversity versus inclusion, or diversity and inclusion, and how are you defining it within your organization? And Ebony, I mentioned I was going to come to you first on this because I saw a post that you made on LinkedIn today, and I liked it, and I'd like for you to share with us your thought around that.
Well, and it's interesting because when I was being thoughtful when anytime I post, I like to make sure that it's relevant and there's some type of quote or meaning that goes behind it, is that I think about why we're here today, which is, talking about diversity and inclusion. And for me, the road to inclusion, as we know, is important for all of us. And so my quote was around diversity is the mix, while inclusion is making that mix work, right? And what does that mean? What it means is that, we can bring all the diversity in. That's easy. That's a no-brainer, right? If we do that, and it's not always easy. Let me rephrase that. But in order to keep the diversity, in order to keep that mix, what's going to make it stick? Well, that's inclusion, of course. So you have to be able to create an environment where people are going to be able to bring their whole selves and their best selves to work. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, why are we just going to have people work and just come to work if they're not passionate and they don't feel like they can just do anything, as far as believing that there's somewhere they can go next in their career, that they can have the passion and the drive to want to do so much. And I know you can feel my energy, and that's just because I'm so passionate about this work and about this topic. And so that was my meaning behind that, again, we can bring in all the diversity, but how do you keep it? How do you retain it? Well, you've got to have inclusive leaders that will allow people to have a seat at the table. And again, be able to bring their whole selves to work.
Yes, absolutely. When you say a seat at the table, I had someone reach out to me, a leader from a very well-known tech company, through LinkedIn. And she was saying, how can I support and what have you? And so my theme was, let's not have that meeting during work hours. Let's have a virtual glass of wine, right? Let's really get to know each other. So not just a seat at the corporate table, but when everyone else leaves and come to your house for dinner or that after drink or what have you, invite me in that as well and include me in your network, right? Because then now you've really been inclusive. Not that I'm just at the work labeled event, but I'm actually at the main event afterwards, where we're really talking about strategies and what's coming down the line, right?
You got it.
But thank you for sharing that, Ebony. I'm going to move over to Dr. Wiley and get your thought on it. Diversity and inclusion, diversity versus inclusion, the road to inclusion.
Well, I'd like to echo some of the things my panelists Ebony has stated. I truly believe in what she's saying. You know, we have to have inclusion for diversity or vice versa. But to echo what you're saying about the table, it's good to be at the table and then the events that take place after, but give me a choice where I'm not penalized if I don't want to go after work, that I have to be a part. That's the equitable component to it that we have to have for all when it's diversity and inclusion. Of course, from the educational standpoint, the goal is to recruit, retain, and graduate our students and get our students prepared to go into the workforce. And in doing that, though, they have to understand differences and how people are different that allows me to collaborate for inclusion. Because some people are learning themselves before they can bring their whole self. So hopefully that's what we're doing in the educational component to get the student ready to get to the corporation. So when they're recruited, they understand they're teachable to learn how they fit within a corporation while they're learning themselves. Because I've seen in summertime is the greatest challenge is when students get here, they start learning, you know, I really can do that. Or they don't have the phobia to ask the question. Now, I'm in agriculture, there's cows and plows and crops and animals. That's our great foundation. But we're science, business, and technology. We have to feed the world. So no matter what job is I'm preparing students, I'm preparing the doctor, I'm preparing the lawyer, I'm preparing the veterinarian, I'm preparing them, but still preparing them to go into a workforce that's diverse. So that's how I see that diversity and inclusion is key. I have to have inclusion first, getting these students and working with we have 105 counties in the state of Kansas, where I was over 200 when I worked in Texas, or over 150 in Kentucky, but they all are trying to meet the same goal of taking the university to the people when it comes to extension. So it's the best kept secrets to some of our underserved audiences. And that's another aspect of working with inclusion and diversity, because we take the university to the people where the students can come to school and dig into the workforce. So that's an overall assessment of inclusion and diversity for success in the workforce.
Yes. And, you know, and you made a great point about students knowing who they are. You know, when I'm talking to students about owning their diversity, when we first say to them, you know, how diverse are you? Give me, you know, write down your diversity, you know, the areas where you're diverse. Normally they'll start off everyone at 3, you know, 4 might be the max. But by the time the conversation is over, they've identified themselves in 7 different areas of diversity. And so, and the make of that is, now that you know who you are, you can be more aware of who other people are as well in your future planning for the workforce. So Kevin, we're going to lead over to you. And get your perspective on the diversity and inclusion model.
Yeah, so I'm going to take a little bit of what Ebony said. I'm going to take a little bit of what Dr. Wiley said, mix it all up, and come up with something that I hope makes some sense.
Okay,
so
go for it.
As I kind of read off the kind of organizations that I had been a part of, it wasn't because I couldn't keep a job. That wasn't the case. I actually have been blessed with doing this work across multiple industries, all the way back to when there was no inclusion and it was just diversity that evolved out of affirmative action. And diversity was defined as Black, white, male, female. So the evolution then was, hey, you know what? We have to now, and I'm talking about the industry, we now have to add inclusion to this. And I'm like, wait a minute, we haven't got the diversity piece right. Now we're adding inclusion. Matter of fact, we probably all have heard people talk about D&I, almost like it's synonymous with each other. 2 very different terms. Then it came, now when you see equity, it's like diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now we've added another one, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. I'm like, wait a minute, we haven't fixed the diversity piece
yet. We haven't fixed the first one.
Right, so why do we keep adding on to the house and the foundation isn't in place? So what I've always done is said, okay, let me clearly define in my organizations what diversity is and inclusion. And then we actually go through exercises where I may have 100 people in the room and ask them to write down what diversity is. I'll get 100 different definitions. I'm like, you wouldn't do that with any other business strategy. Why is it okay to have 100 different definitions? So for us, we've clearly defined with the Cavaliers that diversity is a collective mixture of our people, processes, and teams characterized by similarities and differences. So I know that may sound real academic and kind of way out here, but the reality is that if you don't move diversity beyond just the people conversation, and actually diversity typically is defined as African Americans, quite honestly. It's like a diverse candidate. It's like, what is a diverse candidate? Oh, a Black candidate. So for me, it's call it what it is. And if you're saying diversity means Black, that's what that means. Inclusion for us is creating an equitable environment where everyone has the opportunity to participate. And Dr. Wiley, like you said, give me an option. Inclusion says I may not participate, but at least I have an option to participate. And the two of those actually don't necessarily go hand in hand. And here's my point. You can have diversity in an organization and not have inclusion. You can have diversity and not have inclusion.
Sure.
And they check the box now, and it's go out and hire X amount of Black people. Well, that isn't diversity or inclusion, in my opinion. That's a HR function of go out and hire Black people. Diversity talks more to the overarching mix of your people, your processes, your teams. So with that, it's much broader for me. And in all the organizations that we represent, we also have this thing that's called functional diversity. Because you also have functions that don't see eye to eye and have the same level of attention that people do when they don't see eye to eye. So we look at it more holistically so that it's not just focused on Black people, people of color, women, or other one dimension of diversity.
And Kevin, you know, that's the reason that Dr. Wiley, I agree, have the option to go to these other rooms and what have you. But one thing that I've said in the past is that when you add culture to diversity, then you'll really kind of understand it more. We understand each other more, because if you look at our cultural differences, and you say, okay, well, my dad was in the military. Oh, my dad was in the military. Oh, I grew up in this area. I grew up in this area. I studied here. I studied here. There's so many things we have in common versus things that we don't. So when we begin to have those conversations, and understand the cultural difference versus the race difference, then I think that we could have, we could bond in things a little bit more. But I definitely, I think we need to add that piece to it as well. And diversity, I see it a lot as being the culture that a company create. Now, when you say that it's Black and is white, I know today I was on a webinar and they said, well, the people of color, and now that, they're trying to make that inclusive, people of color and minorities, are really the majority. And so the lady who was speaking, she's an Asian woman. She said, actually, the Asian race is the majority, if you look at the number of people in the world, and took it from a different perspective. So we have a lot to think about, but I definitely think that you're correct. And a lot of times people look at diversity, oh, I need to go hire some Black candidates. So I don't know, how do we move forward past that? As how do we give, or what actionable items do we give our corporate leaders to try to move them past that thought? Kevin.
So what I've been able to do is connect the work of diversity and inclusion to an organization's bottom line. And you may think for us, and it's like sports, and quite honestly, when I got this job, one of my colleagues at my former employer said, oh, Kevin, I mean, that's going to be an easy job. And I'm like, well, why? They're like, look around the league. There's all kinds of Black players there. So I'm like, okay, what does that have to do with diversity? So the point is, and this is a fun fact, there's 147 sports teams. There's only 3 teams across all sports, Major League Baseball, basketball, football, NHL, and soccer. There's only 3 C-suite level diversity officers in all of sports. And the reason why is because there's an assumption, and all of them are in the NBA, and I'm one of those 3. And believe me, that's not talking about me. That's talking about the shame of we don't take this work serious. And Joyce, to your question, how do we connect this and move it forward? Until we think about diversity and inclusion being part of the business mainstream for organizations, it's not going to move forward, because it's going to be an additive. It's going to be an extra to do on the side. And now, as you all have seen, the hottest job in America right now is a diversity job.
Yes.
And all you have to do from a qualification standpoint is be black, and you can get a diversity job. And
I just had this conversation, Kevin. Just had
Ebony,
this
am I lying or
conversation.
not?
That's
So,
and there was a report that came out
Yes.
that said, hey, dear people, if you're going to promote Black people, you don't need to promote them in D&I and HR.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
right.
Exactly. That's one of the biggest challenges I have with positions as such.
Yeah.
But Kevin, I'll let you finish, Kevin, before I say
Yes, Kevin, please.
No,
Sorry.
So the point around that was that there is not any other position at Kansas State, at Boston Scientific, that you would just arbitrarily grab somebody based on their skin color or gender and say you're qualified for the job. So
Actually, you would. It just wouldn't be one of us.
You know what? You're right,
It's
Joyce.
done every day, all day
now you
long.
want to talk. Now you want to talk about white privilege and all of that. We can go there.
I'm just saying.
we can.
I just, you know.
We can go there.
But go
Let's
ahead.
not go there.
Right. So,
Go ahead, Kevin.
Joyce, thank you. Let me rephrase that. we will get tapped for that job that is a diversity job because it's not seen as a job that you need skills for. It's not because it's not part of the business. So my point to your question, in the way that we can connect this and move it forward from an organization, from a corporate standpoint, is that it has to connect to what drives the motivating factors of the C-suite, and that is whatever the business outcomes are. That's how we move it forward, because that's how our value is truly appreciated, not just based on our skin color, gender, or sexual orientation.
Well, Dr. Wiley, just prior to the call, Monica and I were talking about PhD programs. I spoke with a young woman today, just got her PhD, Dr. Henderson Hubbard, Lisa Henderson Hubbard, want to give her for that, because I know that that's hard work. And so there's organizations out there that's looking to fund African Americans who's interested in going to PhD programs because they feel it isn't a large enough presence. So we're doing a lot to recruit the students. What are we doing to recruit your peers?
So that's like a two-part question, because one, in recruiting, like when I took this job in 2003, there was no other assistant dean for diversity. So now all the colleges within Kansas State University has diversity point people that some are assistant deans for diversity and some are not. So the value of the job is really starting, like now it is, it's like the best kept secret. Everybody needs diversity point person or assistant dean for diversity. However, my degree is not in diversity, and my degree is not in social work, where some people think, well, she has to be in social work. All my degrees are in agriculture, economics, engineering, and as well as ag education. But I had to have all of that to get the job for diversity, to show my credence with my peers that I'm not just getting anybody because of their skin color. I'm showing the value of the individuals. They have the intellectual capacity to matriculate, be retained, and graduate with a PhD. So I have found that we have to grow our own when it comes to individuals for PhDs and get them ready. There's several grants out there, but even if you get the grants, like Dr. Robin Merchant, who we know very well, we all went. And, we went and got our PhDs at the same time. She was in another type of grant with the engineering. It was like the GEM project. And I was with agriculture as a whole, with Penn State University. That has been going on since the 90s. But we still need to get our students to understand that you get the job. You might get it because you're Black, but you need to keep the job because you're good at what you do. And because you have what it takes to stay in the job. Because Kevin's right. We don't need to be the best kept secret and it's a fad. Everybody's getting diversity and now it's a fad. And then in 2 or 3 years, everybody's calmed down. COVID's gone. I can't feel good. We can let this move on. And then individuals are the first ones they cut. When they're looking at workforce reduction. We need individuals in these positions to show that there is a value in this position for all, not just ethnic minorities. It's a value to have inclusion and diversity for our Caucasians, as well as our ethnic minorities and domestic minorities. Because if we can all work together and get into the diverse workforce, because like Ebony has this great energy. And so people are respecting her that maybe sometimes they say, oh, well, that's Ebony and she happens to be Black. But everybody can work with her and everything. But the other thing with that is that we can't help but see that we're both Black. But we are accepted and we continue in our jobs because we're good at what we do. We have the credentials, and that's the key thing that I work with our students. They have to have the credentials, because when they get in corporate America, the ERGs and affinity groups are what gets them where they can break off and know who they are, and then go to the work at the big table or in the field or on the line where they can be productive citizens, and then have somebody to come behind them. So that's truly what I see, is that it needs to be sustained and not to be a fad.
You know, Ebony, I know you can chime in here. I know I worked at the African American BRG, the Women BRG, the Hispanic BRG, volunteering with the Veterans BRG, just, I was the inclusive bunny. But, I benefited from a promotion by being seen doing work within the BRGs, but then also often there's not enough people in the BRGs at that level to help everyone. And so you have a cluster, maybe 5 people that everyone is coming to, everyone's trying to get on your calendar, everyone wants coaching and development. And again, you run into that block where there's just not enough people to help them along. I mean, what are you seeing with the corporate BRGs?
So with our, we call them ERGs, which employee resource groups, right? Everybody has a different name.
Everyone has a different
name.
They
do.
Yeah,
Alliance groups,
ours, right. So ours are employee resource groups. And I'll share an example of what we did for our Bridge Boston, or our Black Employee Resource Group. We call it Bridge. So Bridge Boston ERG chapter. It's a small group of Black employees, and they were seeking mentorship. So we started a very personalized mentorship program for that group, because each of our ERGs have a global executive sponsor, and then we have local executive sponsors that are directors and above at a local level. But for the global, it's all of our executive committee members that go over that whole the whole chapter. So in Bridge Boston, our local executive sponsor, who I absolutely admire, Mary Beth said, hey, I am going to send an email out to all my leaders, and I'm going to challenge them to see if they would like to be a part of this mentorship program for our Bridge ERG members. And I have to tell you, it was amazing. And we had success stories. I took it upon myself to personally manage it from end to end. We started it in January 2019, ended it at December 2019. We monitored 13 Black individuals who each had Caucasian mentors.
And that's good.
Out of that group, 4 of them were promoted or given opportunities for assignments. They were able to get out of their comfort zone and share their success, and got exactly what they wanted out of that mentorship relationship.
That's good.
So it can happen. You just have to have the commitment and people that are willing to really vest, because you're right, Joyce, we can't do it by ourselves, right? I can't expect my boss, who is a Black woman, to be able to mentor all the Black employees in our organization. And she tries, she's good at that. But we also have an executive who covers our legal group, who is the highest ranking Black woman in our organization, Desiree. And she is our executive sponsor for all of Bridge. And again, she can't do it all, but she tries. But she is willing to do what she can to not only mentor, but sponsor, because sponsorship is so important. We need to be able to have people talk about us when we're not in the room. And when I say talk about us, I mean talk about how great we are.
Exactly.
Yes.
Okay. And so I think that's another key component. We need to make sure that we're recognizing that sometimes we don't always need the mentorship. We just need people that are going to validate that we are good, and we don't have to keep proving ourselves over and over and over again. And I'll stop there.
It's all about what your leader says about you when you're not in the room. I mean, they can give you, a great evaluation because you've earned it, right? And so they feel like there's no way around that. But then when they get in a room with their peers and other leaders, and they're looking to promote someone or wanting someone to do that stretch, right? We call in corporate doing stretch or make that stretch goal. what are they saying then? Are they
Mhm.
sponsoring you? And that's the difference between mentorship and sponsorship.
Mhm.
Sponsorship is that person that's an advocate for you, you know, that person that's really trying to help you. Someone could mentor you, maybe because they have to. There's companies that have paid mentorship roles, right? And they're just checking the box. They may be mentoring because it looks good on their development. But someone sponsors you and really, you know, have your back and put you out there in a good light, then that's sponsorship.
Well, I can say that Boston Scientific, like, we don't do the whole, you know, as you alluded to about the pay or anything for mentorship. We created a lot of mentorships within a lot of the ERGs where people volunteer, and we have, you know, of course, there's not enough Black people to mentor other Black people, and we recognize that. So, you know, we have a lot of our Caucasian, Asian, Hispanic, you know, who do join those mentorship groups to help mentor our Black employees. So I have to give a lot of credit to Boston Scientific. They have done a lot of great work to really be supportive. And no, we still have a lot of room to grow and a lot of things to do. But I can say, for me personally, myself, I have a lot of sponsors that are Caucasian. And I feel like I know I wouldn't be where I'm at if I just didn't have that continued support.
And that's important.
Yeah, and that's diversity right there. That mentorship and that sponsorship, that's key diversity right there. Because you don't have to be Black to sponsor or be an advocate, or you don't have to be Black to do that. We really need other sponsors to be our allies, because they're truly our allies as we matriculate through our jobs to get them into corporate. So I just want to add on, I think that's what's beautiful, is when we can have, that's when we really have made that leap from inclusion to diversity, is with that. I just think that's so key. I really appreciate that.
So Ebony, I'm hearing you saying that's what good looks like. Is you gave some examples of what good looks like, right, for diversity inclusion in your space, right? And kudos to Boston Scientific, because they're obviously working at it, and they've been. And it sounds like they've been working at it for some time, and they were actually putting matrix in place to measure, right? And that's key. And you know, and kudos too that they have enough African Americans at a leadership level to be able to sponsor, because a lot of companies don't. So they just have to, you have a, you know, another person sponsoring the organization who really aren't even comfortable having the conversation with you that they need to have around what your needs are. So Kevin, if we move over to, I'm going to ping you for sports. If we move over into a sports environment, what would good look like? You know, what needs to take place?
Yeah, so good looks a lot like what Ebony said, and what needs to take place. So a couple things that systemically need to take place. The first is that historically, how people got into positions of power within sports is and it was the epitome of, who do I know, good old boys club, which so-and-so's either uncle, nephew, father, whatever, is part of that team. They pick up the phone and call, and somebody gets a job. Now, I'm being simplistic, but I'm really not. So so not having the kind of systems, because sports is, if you think about professional sports at the team level, it's been a owner that actually had kind of bought the team. It's been more like a kind of pet project or a fun hobby. So therefore, running it as a business has only happened within the last decade. So all of these positions of power have been populated by people that look like the owners, and therefore the organization had never had systems and processes that connected to what we would think about from a progression standpoint, looking at it from, you know, any kind of shared leadership perspective, because it was kind of family and friends who ran that. So as we're shifting the narrative and shifting the culture, one of the things that, I mean, I can share with you what I've done is to take those kind of corporate structures that I've had other places and have instituted that into our organization. So what does that look like? One of the things for us, diversity and inclusion is connected to compensation for our executives. Okay, that's not counting people. That's not saying, oh, we have 5 of those, so therefore you're going to get X% of your bonus. That is looking at it to saying, how has our diversity and inclusion plan actually impacted our business? How has it impacted our fan base? How has it impacted our community relations where we have authentic relationships? how has it impacted the representation of our team members, which we call our employees team members, across all levels at the organization? And do we mirror what our communities look like? So as we connect that back to the financial compensation, that's very consistent to what I've done in corporate positions, and that's connected back because that's what drives organizations. The other thing that kind of what it looks like for us is when, and I am so proud and blessed to work in the NBA, because we are a league, we are a culture that actually encourages freedom of speech. We encourage the fact that we want our players and our teams to represent themselves in an authentic way. So we're doing things such as being consistent and really honoring who we are by the fact that you're going to see down in Orlando on the court when the season resumes the Black Lives logo on the court. Each one of the teams, right? So yes, right. So we're not hiding from it.
Wow.
Each one of the teams going into the season is going to have some representation of the current racial injustices displayed on the courts. You're also going to see on the players, like when we start back up in July, you're going to see the players having very specific logos and statements on their uniforms that mean something to them around freedom of expression. And there's a list of actual sayings in which the players have selected from. So connected back to your question, what does it look like? And one, being true to yourself, being true to your organization, but then secondly, how do you allow for the messages to get out in a very authentic way? And for success for us is doing that. It's communicating in a way that we leverage all of our assets. And our major strategy right now, out of kind of this racial moment of racial inequality, is that we have a strategy as a league of economic empowerment for the Black community. And we have very specific plans of dollars that we are generating into the Black community across all of our teams in all of our communities.
Okay.
That's great, and I have heard about some of those things that they're doing in NBA, and I think that there's other leagues that remain to be unnamed that can follow the NBA's league on that, and I definitely can vouch for that part about, and they've just come to the part where they're becoming businesses. One of my first jobs out of college was in NBA, and the owner hired the GM hired his son, who was the legal counsel and what have you for the team. The accountant was the daughter's best friend. The daughter had a job doing, I don't remember what. And, so they are beginning to run more like a business. Before, let me see if we're on time, because I want to bounce to, they always pull this Rooney Rule out. Yep. I'm not a fan of the Rooney Rule. And corporate has adapted the Rooney Rule, which really I've written an article about it, which that because I have so much, I'm so unfavorable of it. And the Rooney Rule is where you invite us to the table to check the box, right? And maybe there are some instances where it has shown success, but for a lot of times it's a checking of the box. The Rooney Rule says that you bring African Americans, other people of color, what have you, to the table and allow them to interview. But when we send and they'll come to the BRGs and say we want to hire someone, want to interview someone, and we send them our best, and those people leave back kind of disgruntled after they announce who's being hired, right? Because if you're not going to hire me, just don't even invite me to the table, And so has the NBA, how are you guys, what's your thought personally about the Rooney Rule and if it's effective?
Right. When the Rooney Rule first came out, I was opposed to it, Joyce, just like you and your motion. I mean, I can read it in your face right now. It's like, nah, it doesn't work for me. So I was opposed to it because it was exactly as you said. It was a check the box. It was, hey, we just have to interview a person of color, and we're okay to move forward. So as time went on, some of the Black coaches that got hired in the NFL did say that if not for having an opportunity to be in the room to get an interview, they never would have heard of me. Now, coaches went year after year after year being that one Rooney Rule individual, but it got them in the room and the word spread. So I'm like, okay, it may work in corporate. So I've tried the Rooney Rule in corporate, and it has worked to some extent. When I came to the NBA, they were like, Kevin, this is the NBA, not the NFL. So here's what our philosophy is. And that is the rule of three. And Harvard Business School did a study that showed that if you interview a slate of 5 or more candidates, and you have 3 people of color or 3 women or 3 dimensions of diversity outside of white males, that statistically it showed that those individuals will get hired at a much faster rate, because it's not just one person, it's multiple people. So we in the league have adopted what's called the rule of 3. And that is to make sure that we have representation of 3 or more different dimensions of diversity for all the positions. I should say our team have 3 or more different dimensions of diversity for each position in which we interview for. The slate of candidates now look more like our communities look versus before, as you said, I'm just going to pick up the phone and call a relative for that position.
Well, good for you guys. Good for you guys. So in an education space, Dr. Wiley, what's,
Okay. I thought you would keep on going. I got you.
and no, I was trying to figure out the right words. In the education space.
We don't have the Rooney Rule.
You don't have the Rooney Rule?
No,
what do you have?
Uh,
You have the rule of 3. What is it in education?
What we're doing is we're trying to grow our own. We're trying to get enough, because like I said, it's very sad that I'm the first African-American female with a PhD in agriculture to be hired here. And that's the 21st century. So I can't leave here being still the first. So we have to grow our own now. We're getting our students together, and like we're recruiting, we're retaining, and we're placing them. But along with that, we're partnering with corporations that are having the ERDs. We're getting them to mentor, mentor as in Caucasians, mentoring some of our underserved audiences or ethnic minorities, just like Ebony's mentioning within the corporation, but we're trying to get them started now at college. Because we have to see, we got to go at a faster pace than athletics and corporate, especially when it comes to agriculture. But what we're seeing is starting to happen with the different majors throughout the university now. And COVID is not going to help us as much, but we can look at the community college to get the students at the community college to get them to come to the 4-year institution. We got to change our strategy, but it's still going to work. But I look forward to the day that we can get this Rooney Rule to get the students to be fully tenured professors, to apply for the jobs. Now, we got our first African-American female that came through our program at K-State, that now she is at Austin Peay State University in Tennessee. And now we're about to groom who we have 2 graduates, Joyce, of Purdue A&M University, produce of productive people that are now working on their PhDs here at K-State. And that's what's happening, is that we have to go back and we have to work hard this is education. I got to go and get them, personally mentor them, to get my colleagues to respect them, and they'll see we have 3 different African-American males, and they see that all 3 of them are different. So that's the concerted effort that I realize I have to do to have the positive impact on the world. I can't change the world, but if I can have this positive impact right now to get them to an Ebony, or if they're athletes, I got to get them to Kevin. They might not go into the pros, but they can get with Kevin to get into the job component, because they have the intellectual capacity when it comes to athletics that they could probably be in the business component, or get with you, Joyce, Y-Sales, network. And that's why we need to get you back here with the athletics department. But that's the cycle that we have to do education-wise. I have to partner corporately with Ebony and then with Kevin with the different corporations, because some students don't even know that the Cleveland Cavaliers would have that. They wouldn't even know what you're doing. So that's why we have to that's the only thing that the Zoom is really helping us with now. I can get more people to speak to my students because they're not traveling, they're at home, and I can get them to come and speak to the students. So that's what's happening in education. We have to grow our own, and that's That's when it comes to agriculture. We have people on our Dean's Advisory Board. There are various corporations at K-State College of Agriculture Dean who I partner with to get the information out to their corporations to groom our students, to get them to be the first minority to have an internship with some of these major corporations, the Cargills, the Coke, the Hormel, Corteva, you know, and that's with the National Society of Minorities in Agriculture as well, to partner with different groups. That's what we have to do in education. We have to partner to get them to the Ebony and to the Kevin.
Yes, you're right. I love that. We got to grow our own. That should be like a theme or something. I don't know, Monica, we're gonna create something. We got to grow it. Yeah, grow our own or what have you. You know, Monica, let's prepare people for the Q&A. So if you're on Facebook, YouTube, on the webinar direct, and you have questions for our panel, please type them in. And Monica will go over them and ask the questions for everyone.
I have a comment, Joyce.
Yes,
I just
ma'am.
want to add to that interview process, the Rooney Rule, etc. I do want to just end it with, at the end of the day, we're going to hire the best person. Okay. We just have to be more open to saying that it's okay if the best person happens to be Black. It's okay if the best person happens to be Black. And I'm saying it again,
that's
because
okay too. Unless you know your buddy has called and you know that you play golf with and said, hey, I need you to hire my kid. He just graduated, you know, needs a job. So you already you already sort of made that commitment. You know, and then when you get that good person, you tell them all these great things about themselves, and then you dig to find a butt, right? But you, Ebony, you weren't going to hire the best person.
And that's what we want to do, and that's what we promote. At Boston Scientific, yes, we do require diverse slates. We encourage it. We require it because we think it's important. It's important because we know that with a diverse slate, there's hopefully an opportunity that someone will say, you know what? I see something in you,
right?
And I want to hire you, right? And they'll never know if they don't have that diverse slate, right? So that's why requiring it is good, because it at least hopefully will show the interviewer, the hiring person, that hey, it's okay if the best person is Black or Hispanic, you know, or Asian. But let's just make sure we're giving everyone an equal opportunity, right? So that's all I wanted to say.
Good point.
I muted myself. I was saying, right. I think my neighbor is like mowing or clipping or something. Like, get out of here. Like, what are you doing? It's too hot to be out there doing the grass. Yeah, I know it's 90-some degrees out there. I'm in Houston, Texas.
It's 100 here.
Yeah. So do we, Monica, do we have any questions out there from any of the platforms?
So one question is, if a company does not have a employee resource groups or employee network groups, how do you go about recommending that the company starts one?
I can tell
Ebony,
you what,
go ahead.
Yeah. You know, what we do is if we don't have an employee resource group, you know, we encourage people to come to us and, you know, with some guidelines, right? To say, why is it important to start X, Y, and Z groups? So for example, if they don't have a Black employee resource group, then they should come with not just themselves looking for it, they should already have a couple of people saying, yeah, we want one. And this is why we need one. You know, give the importance of not only it's the passion and it means something to you, but it means something to the other employees as well. So I would suggest that you look and see who are the other employees that want to join you to be a part of this. What's it going to look like? What's your purpose? What's your vision? What's your mission? You know, what is your why for wanting to do this? And go to all the leaders to say, we need this. This is why it's important. And it shouldn't only be important to the employee, it should be important to the company, to the leaders. And I promise you, you'll start a movement. You will.
And I will say that to add on to that, and I've talked to some of my students who have graduated to go into corporate America and ask that same question, Ebony, because It's just showing the value. You know, how does this show the value for the output? Because most companies, the bottom line is green. It doesn't have any other color to it, just green. And if they're going to be successful and have their employee to be comfortable and successful, and I think, you know, Ebony said it earlier, you know, to feel like that themselves, it's like to really document the value that this is going to have for all the way to the top, all the way to, and then to the grassroots. And my student has been really successful. It wasn't just for a Black, because I think it was called the Ebony Council at this corporation, but then she was able to look at other groups with a generational and, you know, age and everything. So I think once you show that value, because again, the bottom line is green, they really don't have any other color to it.
Yeah, because they can bring value to the company, because our employee resource groups do. They're part of the strategy. Their mission is, their strategy for their ERGs is tied to our own global strategy at Boston Scientific. And they are a part of some of the business decisions that are made. They are helping to drive some of that revenue. So I love that you said that, Joyce. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Wiley. So sorry, Dr. Wiley.
Got it. She and I, we're pretty close. We're almost one in the same.
Monica, any other questions out there? I can't hear you.
What is one piece of advice that you would give to someone that is fresh out of college, that's looking to work with a company, but they aren't really sure if their environment is inclusive? Like, how do you know a company is inclusive before you interview with them?
Ask.
Like, truly inclusive.
And you know, and ask to speak with other employees, ask them if they have business resource groups, or, you know, and find out what their goals are. You know, I say all the time, the interview process is a conversation. You're interviewing them as they interview you. And when people ask you, oh, do you have any questions you'd like to ask me? Already have them written down and ask. You know, what is your culture here? What are your goals towards building an inclusive environment? Is that a part of your big global strategic goal? Can I find it somewhere in your white papers, you know, or something? Ask. And then also ask to be able to talk to someone. You know, I've gone to apply for jobs before, and I've said, you know, I want to talk to some of the managers, and everyone that I talked to didn't look like me. So then I said, well, I'd like to come and do a tour. And I went and did a tour, and I toured this huge floor, and then toured another huge floor, and I still didn't see anyone look like me. So finally, I just had to ask, is there anyone else that look like me, or will I be the first and only?
But, you know, I'm finding something really challenging with that, though, Joyce, is that I have found that several students now don't know how to ask. And it's almost a phobia to ask. And like, even when you talk to our group, the students have no excuse now. You can Google a company on your phone and sit in the subway, on the plane, or wherever you're doing before you go to the interview, and you can read them on your phone if you have a smartphone. If you have a smartphone, you can go to the library, or if you can't go to the library, you can get somebody's computer. But we have to be able to interview the company while the company is interviewing us. And I stress that to the students all the time. You have to, you don't have any excuse now. You have to be able, and then use people like me. I tell the students, use me, don't abuse me. And the connections that I have, I'm not going to put my name on all of you, but when I put my name and sponsor you, I mean, I'm sponsoring you because we have connections. So I really think that's one of the best things to answer the question on, you're fresh out of college. Hopefully you've already had an internship or something. You're not fresh out of college.
Hopefully, yes. And I do recommend they do internships, as many as possible. Free ones, paid ones, whatever you can do. Were you going to chime in, Kevin?
Yeah, the other thing I was going to recommend is that most of the now platforms in which you can apply for jobs online, there are ratings of these companies.
Exactly.
And you can connect with individuals that actually have worked for those companies a little bit more kind of discreetly. And Joyce is right. You can also ask to speak to other people. So if this person is a person of color who was asking that, you can go online and kind of resource yourself what people are saying about the company, ask people who have left the company. And in the interview process, I've asked before, can I speak to your highest ranking African-American? Part of the interview process, or whatever dimension of diversity is, highest ranking female, or whatever it is. So I really like what you said, Joyce, around you know, you're interviewing that company, they're not interviewing you.
Mhm.
You know, you got to put yourself out there, but it takes courage to do that. And, you know, we have to help our babies get there because, you know, we weren't who we are when we were that age, right? And so that's why we have to continue to invest in them and pour in them to help them get there.
Mhm. And I think the other thing is social media. I'm finding that the students with social media, especially when they're fresh out of college, is to really use social media to your advantage. First of all, companies are looking at you. They have people that's all they do is look on social media and seeing what you're doing. And so what I tell students all the time is you need to use social media to your advantage. Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, they say it's antiquated, it's only for old people, but I guarantee some of the old people that are interviewing, you might be on it. And so you need to really look at that. So I really like to encourage somebody fresh out of college and while they're in college to utilize social media to your benefit.
Absolutely. I have all the students go and get on LinkedIn. I'm like, you know, call me back when you get a LinkedIn profile, you know, and to your point, I went on LinkedIn today, searched the company, and then it said, do you want the people in the company or, you know, or just a company? And it showed me thousands of people that were on LinkedIn that worked for this organization.
Wow.
So there you go.
All righty. Well,
Other questions?
the other questions have been answered throughout the time of you guys talking through the panel. So that was
Wow.
Well, we're wrapping up on time. Monica, thank you. I want all of us to get one takeaway. And that one takeaway for our audience, I want you, you know, because we have to take accountability. We, as I tell the students, we have to own our diversity. We have to own our careers. We have to own our career paths. We have to own our development. We have to invest in ourselves. So I'd like for you guys to give one tip or action item that the viewers on, you know, on the webinar and social media and things that are following the webinar right now, what can they go and do themselves to help move forward towards a more inclusive environment? Ebony, because I saw you write down some stuff for them.
Yeah, you know, to move towards a more inclusive environment, it, you know, that's a good one there. And I think, you know, when I think about Boston Scientific, you know, we empower our employees to really champion one another, right? Especially with our ERGs, where we have 9 ERGs, you know, our South Asian, Pacific East Asian, our LGBTQ, our disability, our veterans, our women, our bridge for Black employees. And I mentioned the disability. I know I'm forgetting one, and, you know, forgive me here, but
That's
you know,
okay.
we empower each of our employee resource groups to, it's not just for them, but it's to invite other employees to learn about each of those employee resource groups and the members that are in those groups so that we can move towards a more inclusive environment. And what I mean by that is if we don't take the time to get to know people, appreciate and understand their backgrounds and where they come from, how are we going to appreciate who they are, especially when they're bringing their ideas forward? You know, because a lot of times people won't speak because they're too afraid. But if we create a space where they're allowed to do that and share their ideas that may be different from yours or mine, you know, we're working towards that more inclusiveness because people feel comfortable around each other to be able to do that, right? I mean, if you're comfortable around people, you feel included. You know, you may be the only one in the group, but if people are inviting you to be a part of that conversation and really listening to you and taking those ideas and implementing them, you know, that's that inclusion piece where you feel it. But now when you're telling them you've got their attention, explain to them, why am I the only one, right? So how do you make sure you let them know that, what are we gonna do to change the dynamic so I'm not the only one here? You've got the inclusion down pat, so let's include some more people, meaning let's bring some more diversity to the table, right? So again, passionate, love this panel, love hearing from everybody, but that's my 2 cents. And all I can say is keep being a champion, keep being you, keep pushing the needle, and let's make sure we stand up for what we believe in and what we know is right. Lead with your core values, okay?
Lead with your core values. Thank you, Ebony. Dr. Wiley.
I really echo with everything. I mean, Ebony just said it really great. But to add on to that, and adding on, I mean, please remember what she says, especially about your core values. But accept, your imperfection, because don't just try to be perfect, once you get out. Like I said I'm the first, not to brag, but I said I'm the first because I need you to come behind me and replace me. I mean, and we can only do that for diversity if we can get more people at the table and to be heard at the table and to trust different allies. That's one thing. The only reason I've been able to be here 16 years, it's been very hard, but I had allies that when I said something at the table and I was totally ignored, one of my white male colleagues would say the same thing and it would be heard. Now, I wasn't upset about that. I was glad it was heard. And I learned that I had to get that strategy, that now I am at the table and I'm being heard with my voice. So a lot of times it's perseverance, and you have to be very strategic in a positive way for the success of others and not just yourself. You have to be selfish in an unselfish way when you're the only lonely at some of these tables, because we have to have people to come behind us. That's the only key thing that I said, besides what Ebony said, is to, accept who you are, imperfections and all, know yourself, love yourself, but you have to get those allies that you can trust. Now, this is on the educational component, because I'm educating the people to come behind me, to have the courage to get with an Ebony and to get with a Kevin, because I'm trying to get them to make all their mistakes with me so they don't make as many mistakes to get into corporate America, because I don't want them to get fired. Make the mistakes here at a university with me, so when you get your internships and you go to corporate, you can keep your job so people can come behind you. So know yourself, because when you know yourself, you can truly be true to yourself. And I just really appreciate you, Joyce, for allowing me to be part of this team. And I'm the Chief Diversity Officer for the College of Agriculture and K-State Research and Extension. I don't want anyone to think that I'm taking Dr. Brian Samuel's job. I see on the flyer it says K-State.
Yeah.
So Dr.
Okay.
So Dr. Samuel is our first Chief Diversity Officer. Now let's think about that. In the 21st century, K-State's first Chief Diversity Officer was less than 3 years ago. And that's who Dr. Samuel, Brian Samuel is. And we got him out of Chattanooga, Tennessee. So I definitely wanted to make that known. I'm the Chief Diversity Officer for the College of Agriculture, which is the largest college show. So I do put that in. I'm very proud of my college.
Thank you, Dr. Wiley.
Mm-hmm. No, thank you. Thank you.
And Kevin, any takeaways, recommendations on how
sure.
they can move forward in inclusion?
Yeah. The one thing that I just wanted to leave people with, and first, thank you, Joyce, for allowing me to be a panelist. Monica, I appreciate that as well. Ebony and Dr. Wiley, I will take any student that you want to send our way. So here's my final takeaway. And there's a kind of a lecture series that I do that talks to students, particularly students of color, about understanding what their cultural added value is. Right now, being a person of color is in vogue. Being Black is hot right now. So you're going to have companies that are coming to college campuses, hiring Black people. Our cultural added value is not our skin color. It is the experiences that we have gone through that are uniquely because of our skin color or whatever our stages in life have been that have created who we are individually. So if we don't know what our added value is in the diversity equation, then we're being hired based on the assessment of what employers are hiring us for, which I have conversations around. Here is my Black experience and what this has done to make me uniquely different than somebody else. It's not my skin color, it's the experiences that I've had as a Black man.
Bravo, love it.
I love it.
Thank you. I love it. Thank you. If I can give, first of all, thank you guys for joining us on this panel. Definitely appreciate each and every one of you. And if I would have one takeaway, one thing I want to say is that I like Boston Scientific as a company because I like Ebony. I remember when I met Ebony, I was going to a panel discussion that Boston Scientific was going to be on to talk about their company. And the goal was to hire in a diverse environment and tell about their company. But her light and her spirit carried on and that I really navigated to her. And recently we've reconnected and she always lets her light shine. And so what I've been saying to people lately is be mindful of your brand. Be mindful of your brand. You have to present the brand of the person that you want to be. You can't say you want to be the president of the company and, you know, and not that well, I guess this is a judge, you know, and on your social media is pictures of you twerking. You're not showing anything intellectual. You're not showing anything that you're, you know, committed about education, your learning, any perspective. You know, it's time to reinvent our brands, to enhance your brand and make sure your brand speaks to the power of the individual that you are. Let's have some fun. There's a time and a place for everything. Let's have fun responsibly. Let's definitely have fun. But when it comes to who you want to be in your life and in your world, you really need to begin to think about that and process that and make sure that your brand, you know, I talk about the pie in corporate performance, image, and exposure often. Make sure that your brand, and when you think about the pie in corporate, that your brand speaks to you and who you want to be and your thought level of where you want to go with that and what you really bring to the table. Because as Kevin said, we're strong and resilient and enduring what have you because of our experiences as African-American individuals, not because of the skin color. And I don't think that with any individual. But if I could say anything as a takeaway, be mindful of your brand. And then make sure that you are clear on your mission and what you want to do, and then go out there and do it.
Well said. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
a good ending. That's a very
Well,
good.
thank you guys for joining us, and also thank all of our audience members, those that hopped on the panel, those that are on Facebook. We did YouTube tonight for the first time because we have something special coming. So we went out to YouTube and then we redirected to Facebook. So hopefully we didn't lose any of our Facebook audience that we have week over week. Next week, same bat channel, same bat time, we're going to be talking about the customer experience. We've moved from customer service to customer experience, especially is very important in this virtual space. There's some companies that have already been doing it very well. So I'm going to bring some leaders from those companies to talk about that and be able to share with, you know, you, the entrepreneur, the small business owner, and even the corporate leaders that are now having to be in a virtual space, what it's going to take to create a good virtual customer experience. Again, I am Joyce Johnson, author, speaker, sales champion, coach, and founder of Why Sales Network. Thank you for joining us, and good night. Make it a great evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Nice meeting
Bye.
everybody.
Thank
Nice
you guys.
meeting
Appreciate you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Monica.
Bye.